So Dana White's Contender Series 2023 is going to be coming up in as soon as about 3 weeks, and I've gone through every single fight that has been officially announced and given you guys my top 10 fights that I believe that you must watch for this season. Now, the list doesn't really have that set of a criteria. Towards the end, I kind of do just have bangers, like fights that I think are going to be absolute wars, fight of the night kind of fights, absolute classics. And towards kind of the middle of the list as well, I've just got interesting fights. Like we've got some glory kickboxers coming in. We've got a former kickboxing world champion coming in. There's a lot of interest to a lot of these matchups that have been made. It is also worth noting, yesterday I did a top 10 fighters that you must watch. I think that was a pretty good video as well. But I have tried my best to not include those fighters in this video as much as I can. Although I think they're going to be in great fights themselves. I want to talk about some fresh matchups in this video today. And now with that being said, let's get into number 10. And number 10 is going to be a flyweight fight between Kevin Borjas and Zinedine. And this is a striker versus grappler matchup. That's how I would describe it anyway. Borjas has a lot of wins by KO. Zinedine has a lot of finishes by submission. And he's a great grappler. As long as this fight is on the feet, it's going to be scrappy if it gets down to the ground. Maybe Zinedine will be able to get it going and maybe show off what he's able to do, but it should be a scrap. It should be a fun brawl. Flyweights are always pretty fun fighters. Flyweights are always technical fighters. I think we're going to see a very fun scrap between these two, and depending on where the fight goes, could potentially determine the winner as well. As I did say, it is a striker versus grappler matchup for the most part. It's a fun one at 125 pounds in week number 1. So this is going to be in the first week of 2023 season. The next one is number 9, Abdul Karim Al Sawadi taking on George Hardwick. And you might think, why is this number 9, Artem? Well, there are better fights in my opinion to watch. Now, I love George Hardwick. I could talk about George Hardwick all day. I think he's a fantastic fighter. However, it does take two to tango, and I do believe that this is a fight which George Hardwick is probably going to have a lot of success in. He's a really good boxer. He's a very, very high-level fighter. He's a guy that has a lot of upside, a very high potential as well. Very good fighter for only 26 years old at lightweight. Abdul Karim Al Sawadi, he could give George Hardwick some trouble, but I do believe this is a matchup which George Hardwick is going to shine, but it should be a fun one nonetheless. Now, number 8 is going to be between Eli Aaronov and Zachary Reese. Banger all over it, depending on how it goes though, to be honest, because Eli Aaronov, he is a wrestler for the most part, but he's a fun wrestler. He went out there and beat Mariusz Kudzakewicz, who was a really good fighter who fought on Dana White's Contender Series 3 times, I believe he was on Dana White's Contender Series, which is pretty crazy. But Zachary Reese, he's 5-0, and what's so impressive about his career, man, he's 5-0, and the longest he has ever been in a professional fight is 4 minutes and 13 seconds. But if you exclude that, he has 3 wins in under a minute, which is absolutely ridiculous. He doesn't really have the highest level of competition, you could say. He has gone out there against not really the best guys in the world, but he beat Aaron Phillips, who was on the Ultimate Fighter season 29, I believe. And then he went out there against a guy that was 5-10. Went out there, fought like a madman, knocked him out in 52 seconds. This could be an absolute car crash of a matchup, depending on how it goes. If Zachary Reese goes out there and wins in less than a minute, then maybe this is a wasted spot. It would be fun, but it wouldn't really be like the banger I'm expecting it to be. But I do believe this could be a banger. Eli Aaronov is a fantastic wrestler, but maybe if he can't get that wrestling going, we could see something special between these two middleweights. I think it's going to be a fun fight. Zachary Reese is a fun guy to watch. I mean, he finishes most of his opponents in less than 2 minutes. So of course, he's a fun fighter to watch. But it's going to be a good one. That's why it sits at number 8 on my list. Number 7 on the list is Isis Verbeek taking on Josephine Nutson. Josephine Nutson is a former world champion in kickboxing. Isis Verbeek is a former glory kickboxer who has kickboxed at a very high level. They're both very technical strikers. They're both very good strikers, and that is why it's going to be a pretty fun matchup, because I would be very surprised if this fight hit the mat. It should be a striking matchup for all 3 rounds, or as long as the fight lasts. Josephine Nutson has had, in my opinion, the high level of competition. She fought Yadam So on Road to UFC a year ago. Looked really good in that fight, and then she fought Jacinta Austin, who's a really good Australian fighter. Beat her in a split decision over at UAE Warriors. Isis Verbeek hasn't really fought the best levels of competition, but as I said, former glory kickboxer, has kickboxed at a very high level. It should be a fun matchup between 2 female fighters with very, very high levels in kickboxing outside of MMA. The next fight is between Eduardo Nieves and Denise. I did talk about Denise in my last video about the top fighters you need to watch out for. But Denise, if you guys are unfamiliar with him, a former Glory kickboxer. I believe his professional kickboxing record is 29-7. I could be incorrect on that, but he fought for Glory. He didn't have the most successful career with Glory, but, you know, the technique is there, the skill is there, and my goodness, has it gone well for him in MMA, because this guy is knocking everybody out in the first round. Once again, a guy that's finishing people by KO in round number 1, looking very, very good. And one thing I'm going to say about Eduardo Nieves is he goes out there to do the same thing, but with not a lot of technique, really. Eduardo Nieves goes out there and he bombs away. You see every single win by him, 7 of them all by KO, most of them in the very first round. He was on Dana White's Contender Series last year, where he was beating Michael Parkin up on the feet, and then he gassed out in 90 seconds, and that's not even an over-exaggeration. Watch the fight. It was absolutely crazy. But he's looked good since then. It's going to be a fun fight between an absolute brawler, a guy that's willing to bomb away, between Eduardo Nieves, and a more technical striking heavyweight in Denise. But maybe Nieves could lure Denise into a brawl, and we could have an absolute heavyweight slugfest on our hands. That could be fun, but I think it's going to be a good matchup nonetheless. A striking matchup at heavyweight. 2 guys that love to swing, 2 guys that love to bang. It's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a good one, and that's why it does make my list. The next one is going to be Dylan Salvador versus Okie. I'm so sorry if I said his name incorrectly there. But the reason why this is on the list is I do believe it's going to be a very high-level fight, and Okie is a very highly touted prospect, a very highly hyped-up prospect. But one thing I'm going to say about Dylan Salvador is he is very interesting to me. Dylan Salvador is only 30 years old, but he has had a massive career in kickboxing. I believe he also fought for Glory as a kickboxer, but I know he had a 79-12 kickboxing record, which is absolutely ridiculous. He fought for Glory and Glory of Heroes, so yes, he has kickboxed at a high level. Very, very good kickboxer, very good striker. The most exciting or I guess interesting part about his game is most of his wins come by submission, which is crazy. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is how he is getting his fights done. And Okie is a very hyped up prospect. Personally, I actually don't know too much about him, but he does have a very, very good win over a 13-0 opponent only 8 months ago. But Dylan Salvador is the guy that, in my opinion, for me anyway, not in my opinion, just for me personally, brings a lot of interest to this matchup because of the kickboxing background, because of the experience in kickboxing as well. 79-12 is an absolutely ridiculous record as well to have. And he's an interesting fighter because he's a kickboxer that grapples. It's interesting, and that's why it's interesting to me. The next one is between James Longtop and Malik Lewis. Once again, this is on here because it's gonna be a banger. I mean, come on, if you've seen Malik Lewis's fight against Trevor Peak, that was a fun fight. You know, he did lose that fight, but he was beating Trevor Peak until he lost. And James Longtop is a guy that if you've been watching my videos about, I think I might have made 2 videos about fighters from Peru that the UFC should sign. And it is becoming pretty clear that Peru is a market that the UFC is trying to get into. They signed Rolando Bedoya, they signed... oh man, this is embarrassing. Daniel Marcos. They've got James Longtop. They've got Kevin Borjas on Dana White's Contender Series. I mean, it's clear to me that Peru is a market that the UFC is trying to expand into. And James Longtop has always been a guy that I talked about that would be quite a smart signing onto the list. Now, he has fought a pretty decent level of competition. He's won a lot of these fights inside the distance as well. And Malik Lewis is also a guy that showed on Dana White's Contender Series. He's willing to scrap. He's willing to take some big shots. He's willing to give a lot of big shots as well. He's a very, very fun fighter. He looked good against Trevor Peak until he didn't. He beat up on Trevor Peak until he wasn't beating up on him anymore. He's won 1 fight since then, and now he's taking on James Longtop. This is going to be a scrap between 2 6-foot-tall lightweights as well. I mean, come on, this is going to be fun. It really is. Both guys are going to scrap with each other. Both guys probably will keep it on the feet as well and scrap with each other on the feet. However, I did notice when I was researching for the Trevor Peak fight that Malik Lewis did do a lot of wrestling in his fight, so maybe it won't be as fun as what I'm expecting it to be, but from what I've seen from Malik Lewis, he does love to scrap, he does love a good fight, and so does James Longtop. That's why it's going to be a good one. This next one, again, is another interesting fight to me. I do believe it's going to be a fun fight, but a lot of the interest for me, personally, does come from the Cesar Almeida side. Once again, because he's got that kickboxing background, you know, he is pretty old. He's 35 years old for Dana White's Contender Series, but he's fought for Glory Kickboxing, and he's had a little bit of success as a kickboxer as well. But now he's transitioned over to MMA, and once again, it's worked out pretty good for him. 3 wins by first round KO. Not really over the best guys at all, which isn't really too much of a sample size to go by. But Lucas Fernando is also a striker, so it's going to be very interesting to see if Lucas Fernando tries to kickbox with the Glory Kickboxer. I mean, who really knows what is going to happen? It's interesting to see so many high-level kickboxers on Dana White's Contender Series this year. Does make me very excited. Definitely something I am very much looking forward to seeing. But Lucas Fernando, he's also a striker. He also likes to stand and strike. He does have a couple submission wins, of course, so that would be probably a smart way to win. But he's fought some good guys. 4-0, 7-2, 18-3, 8-2. Come on, this is going to be good. He's fought some high levels of competition. He's a striker for the most part. Cesar Almeida, Glory Kickboxing background. It just adds a lot of intrigue to the matchup. Is Lucas Fernando going to go out there and try and strike with the Glory Kickboxer? Who knows what's going to happen, man? I'm telling you guys, this is a fun fight. This is a fight, a sneaky good fight to look out for. That's why it's number 3 at the list. Very high up on the list. I'm very much looking forward to this fight, if you can't already tell. And another fight that I'm really looking forward to seeing is Carlos Prates versus Mitch Ramirez. Now, Carlos Prates was number 10 on my list for fighters that you've got to watch out for. Not because of his crazy good record, but because of the way that he wins fights. I mean, come on, man. Look at this guy. He's on a massive win streak right now. Most of those wins by KO in the very first round, and a KO win over the great Charles Oliveira, former UFC champion of the world, a guy that's on a great run right now himself. And Carlos Prates knocked him out. One of my favorite fighters ever. Charles Oliveira got KO'd by this man. Absolutely ridiculous. KO'd him with a jab as well. That's the power that this man holds. He'd kicked a guy that was 21-7 for LFA. Knocked out a guy that was 12-6 for LFA as well in the first round. I mean, fun fighter. And then Mitch Ramirez was meant to be on he was meant to be on The Ultimate Fighter, and he was one of the guys that got kicked off the show by Conor McGregor. So obviously Mitch Ramirez is going to be coming into this fight with something to prove, something to kind of show that he should have been on tough, all these sorts of things. Looked incredible in his matchup against Jeremy Holloway. That is the single best performance that he's ever put on. I know you could say, well, he knocked out a guy that was 11-3 in 40 seconds, but I mean, that's fun. That's all cool and all, but I guess you can't really tell so much about someone with a KO win in 40 seconds than you can with a KO win in over 10 minutes, you know? And he looked incredible against Jeremy Holloway. Not the highest level of competition, but he looked really good in that matchup. This is going to be a fun fight. Both guys are strikers for the most part. Both guys have KO power as well, especially on that Carlos Prates size. I'm telling you guys, this is going to be a banger. Both guys as well, pretty big for their weight class. I cannot say this guy's name. I'm so sorry, Mitch Ramirez. Mitch Ramirez is 6'2" at 170 pounds. Carlos Prates is 6'1" at 170 pounds. Absolute banger of a fight. I mean, this is going to be... It's going to probably be a lot more technical than I'm going to describe, but it's going to be a car crash, man. It's going to be 2 power strikers coming out there trying to knock each other out. It's going to be fun, and I think it probably will be quite a technical battle, but somebody is getting slipped in this matchup, and it's going to be very, very fun to watch. I cannot wait for this matchup. And now that was my number 2. That's going to be taking place on week number 4. But my number 1, if you guys know me and you've been listening to me talk on and on and on and on about one individual, you'll know what number 1 is. Number 1 is going to be Luciano Pereira versus Felipe dos Santos. And it takes 2 to tangle. It takes 2 to tangle. I didn't know much about Luciano Pereira, honestly, until he was announced to fight against Felipe dos Santos. If you guys don't know, Felipe dos Santos is like my guy, dude. I absolutely love Felipe dos Santos. I describe Felipe dos Santos in a way that you won't believe until you watch his fight. He is a more exciting and more aggressive version of Charles Oliveira. This guy goes out there. A second does not go by without Felipe dos Santos throwing a strike. It really doesn't. This guy is the, peak aggression version of a shootbox Diego Lima fighter. He goes out there, he is high volume, high excitement, high pressure, he's always running forward, he's always throwing volume. As I said, a second does not go by without this guy throwing a strike. It is absolutely ridiculous. He throws spinning kicks, he throws high kicks, I mean, he throws jumping knees. Oh, this guy throws everything, man. He throws the kitchen sink at you, and if he can't get you out of there, it doesn't matter because he's got good cardio, which is crazy because of the size of this man. He's 5'7", and he's a big 5'7" with 125 pounds at flyweight. You guys know I love flyweights as well. But dude, you watch this fight. If you guys have the time, I say this every single time, I've recommended this fight so many times, watch him fight against Hugo Pereira. Now, there is a little bit of a sketchy sort of moment because maybe Hugo Pereira should have got the decision, but if you can put that aside, watch this fight. It is absolutely ridiculous what Felipe dos Santos does in that matchup. It is one of the best fights you will ever see because Felipe dos Santos is a madman. If he's not your favorite fighter, he probably will be at some point. I'm telling you guys, this guy is absolutely insane. Now, as I said at the start of me talking about this number one spot, it takes two to tangle, and Luciano Pereira, you guys are going to be excited because he does something very similar. He loves to bomb away himself. I wouldn't say, I mean, I described Felipe dos Santos as a guy that has no technique whatsoever, but he is quite technical. I would say Luciano Pereira is probably like a less technical version of Felipe dos Santos. He loves to bomb away. He should have won his last fight against Gabriel Zilla, which was a rematch, by the way. But it was a disqualification due to an illegal knee. But he was winning that fight until that happened. He was beating up Gabriel Zilla until that happened. But before that, dude, this guy wasn't really fighting the best guys, to be honest. But Felipe dos Santos, hey, I mean, I would be, she has fought some pretty good guys. But I would be a hypocrite to say that, to judge Pereira for that when dos Santos hasn't really fought the best guys himself. But my goodness, is he fun. He goes out there, he finishes people in the first round. This guy wants to finish you, man, and so does Felipe dos Santos. I don't know if I've described the fight in a good way whatsoever, but if you're not excited for this fight, I'm going to make sure that you are by the time that happens, because this is going to be probably the craziest fight Dana White's Contender Series has ever seen, if it goes the way that I am envisioning it to go. Both guys, they're going to meet in the middle. It's going to be an absolute car crash. It literally will be. I think Felipe dos Santos, with his size and with his absolute ridiculous volume, might be the guy that is pushing Luciano Pereira back, but that's not going to stop Pereira from throwing back. These guys, they're going to exchange in the pocket. I mean, maybe someone goes for a takedown. If anyone does, it probably would be Felipe dos Santos because he is a very good grappler, and he does have surprisingly good fight IQ as well. I will give him that credit, but when this guy's on the feet, oh my goodness, I just can't describe this fight well enough. You guys are gonna have to watch it. If this ends up being a boring fight, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I mean this on paper, this is one of the better fights that you'll probably see in I believe it takes place in August. One of the better fights that you will see in August, and probably one of the better fights that you might see this year as well. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. It's going to be crazy. Hopefully I described it well. Hopefully you guys are as excited for this fight as I am, because you should be. You really should be. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous. I cannot wait for it. And that's probably going to be the end of the video. I didn't really have any honorable mentions, but I would say one honorable mention for a fight that you should look forward to is going to be Tom Nolan versus Bogdan Grad. Now, personally, it does just add, maybe it's just a little bit of bias because I'm from New Zealand, you see, so this fight is a little bit interesting to me because Tom Nolan is from Australia and he's probably one of the best Australian prospects out there right now. Bogdan Grad's a big step up in competition for him, though. I wanted to put him on this list, but I thought maybe it was a little bit of bias from my side that I didn't want to put him on the list. I think there are some fantastic matchups to be had on this Dana White's Contender Series. Let me know what you think about the top 10 list that I just created. If you haven't already, please do watch that top 10 fighters, because I thought it was a pretty good video. And with all of that being said, if you haven't subscribed already, please do. If you do like my content, please like the video if you liked the video. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys so much for watching.